yeah, so I think it would be nice to have a recording of this session afterwards. So welcome everyone. Welcome to this first session on soft skills being hosted by the Peer Mentorship Program. And my name is Julia Mwiruri, and I'm a cloud advocate from Microsoft. I've been running this program for the last 2 months, and this time it's going to be slightly different. So yes, I'm really excited to see how this session is going to turn out. So just something to note is that for those that are joining that are not part of the mentorship program, we'll share a link where you can just read more about what the mentorship program is about and how you can be plugged in. And for those that are from the mentorship program, welcome, and please connect with your mentors as well. So just a few acknowledgements. I know we have a few student ambassadors on the call. So the student ambassadors can also introduce themselves on chat. I believe we have Doris from the Coding and Kahawa community. So you can also introduce yourself on chat just for people to connect with you. And then we have the program mentors. So those are the mentors that will be mentoring the students that are going through this mentorship program. And so for today, the session will cover CV and resume best practices. And we have an amazing speaker from Microsoft. I will not try and pronounce his name because I know that I will butcher that name. So I will just let him introduce himself. And as we continue, in case you have any questions, please feel free to post them on the chat. So we'll just have the presentation from our speaker. Then afterwards, probably we'll have 10 minutes for Q&A. But in the course of the presentation, in case you have any questions, feel free to post them there. So I think I will leave it at that and introduce our speaker. Now feel free to take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Julia. Can everyone hear me? Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Excellent. Brilliant. Well, good afternoon. I think it is afternoon. I think we're all or evening for some. My name is Aurel Mesboye. I'm based in London, UK, but I'm originally from Cameroon, hence the name. So it's a French sounding name. So if you're saying it, just put your best French accent on and you'll be there or thereabouts. So yeah, I'm really pleased to be here, obviously virtually today, to speak to you all, to give you a bit of an insight into well, firstly, university recruiting at Microsoft, and then we'll talk more specifically around some CV kind of hints and tips as well. Okay, so let me share my screen. If you don't mind, could you all just, by way of a thumbs up, just let me know when you can see my screen. Can you all see my screen? Yes, excellent. Cool. So as I said, my name is Aurel. I'm a university recruiter. So my role at Microsoft really is around, so I help the local development centers in Africa, so African development centers, or ADCs as they're often referred to. We have one in Kenya, as you're aware, in Nairobi, and we also have another one in Lagos in Nigeria. Okay, and then we have a bigger kind of office down in South Africa, which is more kind of what we call go-to-market roles, so non-technical engineering teams that tend to be based in a more salesy environment. So I help the development centers recruit for kind of young and aspiring university students into our internship program and also into our graduate programs. And I predominantly focus on kind of engineering recruitment. Okay. Cool. So this is just a very, very quick run through around Microsoft's presence in Africa. I know some of you ambassadors, you might be familiar with this content, or certainly with this already, but it's always just worth recapping in terms of, so Microsoft has been in Africa for well over 30 years now. First opened an office in 1992. Some offices across in Cairo, and still do to this day. And you can see the different milestones there. Most notably the kind of data center launch in 2017, and then more recently the development centers that were launched in 2019. Okay, so on to university program. Okay, so at Microsoft we have two programs where we target university students. So we have an internship program and our graduate program, or the full-time one, which is there on the right for you to see. So first and foremost, the internship program. So what I will say about the internship program, it's targeted. So we really target undergraduate students. So the intention behind this internship program is to hire undergraduate students to give you some experience and work experience, and that could last from anything from 3 to 6 months, depending on your university course and also where you're based. Okay, so in Kenya, our internships tend to be 3 months across the summer. In Nigeria, for example, that tends sometimes between 3, sometimes that's 6 months as well. Okay, so to be eligible for our internship program, you need to be enrolled into a full-time degrees, which I believe most, if not all of you are. Obviously a registered or an accredited university institution, which once again I believe all of you are. And then the only other criteria we have is that upon completion of your internship, so our internship typically run in the summer months. So if we think about kind of the US summer, unfortunately we use US terms globally. So that's kind of from May, June, July onwards. Okay, so that's what we mean by the summer months. Okay, so the other criteria is that you have at least one academic term or at least one academic year left at the end of your internship. So if you were to do your internship in 2023, for example, which is the next hiring season, in May 2023, you do your 12 weeks with us, then you must have at least another kind of semester left of uni at the end of that internship. Okay. And then for our full-time, obviously there we're targeting graduating students. Okay, so we'll be starting the recruitment process for graduates in 2023, so next year. So therefore we're looking for students that will be graduating. Okay, so in terms, as I say, we have multiple channels or programs. So as I mentioned, we talked about the internship opportunity. So we hire for interns in both our ADCs, in ADC East, which is obviously Nairobi, and also in the ADC West. Likewise as well for our graduate opportunities, we hire for graduates. The numbers vary depending on which ADC you're applying to, but we hire for graduates across both our ADCs, East and West. And also this year, we're reviving a really cool and exciting program where we'll be hiring for graduates to work in our US offices, so in our US HQ in Redmond, in Washington State. So this year, yeah, we're reviving that program. So we'll be looking for the best and brightest candidates or graduates to come and join our team in the US. And obviously, everything in terms of visa and transport and relocation is all taken care of. And then, of course, we also have really specialized in these opportunities within the research team, so Microsoft research team, where if you're working up to your PhD, so if you're postgraduate in your education, you're doing a PhD, we also have opportunities for students that fall within that bucket, and that tends to be predominantly in our ADC East, so in Kenya. Okay. So what intern roles are we hiring for? So once again, they vary, but they tend to be the bulk of them of our positions tend to be within software engineering and program management. Okay, and then you're probably thinking, okay, what do you need to what program to apply for? So, or what do you need to be studying? Sorry, I lost my chain of thought there. What do you need to be studying to apply for one of our programs? So we're not really prescriptive on your degree. So we don't say you must be studying a computer science degree. Okay, what we do ask, and you can see here at the bottom, we'll take on students from a variety of backgrounds. whether you're doing a maths degree, or physics, mechanical engineering. We've taken on some electrical and electronics engineering. But the important thing, and you see as long as there, which is in bold, is that you have good computer science fundamental, can strongly code in one of the main object-oriented programming languages. So that's your C, C++, C#, Java, Python, etc. And then you have an interest in computer science. So if you have those three elements and you can get that outside of your course, so you don't necessarily need to be studying a computer science degree. That's why we're not prescriptive around the kind of degree backgrounds. I've seen a couple of comments there around rejections and stuff, but when we get onto the CV part, what I'll do, I'll share some of the common kind of mistakes or errors I see in applications, which sometimes mean if you have applied for us, you might see your applications rejected. Obviously, we get huge volume of applications, so hopefully this session will give you some tips that will give your application and your CV a better chance of being seen and put forward to the latter stages by recruiters. And that's just not for Microsoft, because I appreciate, I'm not naive. Hopefully you all come and work for Microsoft, but also being realistic, appreciate that you might go to other companies as well. Okay, let's get into our application process at Microsoft. Everything's online, so you have to apply online. So I'd encourage you to make a note of the website, microsoft.com/university. Okay. Our roles will be going live. So in Microsoft, we're working to a slightly different kind of fiscal year or financial year, whereby we're just starting this new one in July. So our opportunities will be going live around August, September, our new opportunities for 2023. So make a note of that website and save it, bookmark it. So the first step is kind of a CV resume review, which is done by the recruiter, and this is where there's a lot of where a lot of candidates applications fall down. So as I say, during the next 20 minutes or so, hopefully I'll highlight some of the most common mistakes and ways you can improve your CVs to make sure that you get past this very first stage. Then the next step, in terms of we invite you for a phone interview or a Teams interview. It's not a phone interview. And then we'll also ask you to take a technical exercise through Credility. Okay. And then if you do well in that, we'll then invite you to come back for a final round interview. So you'll do 3 interviews of 4 to 5 minutes with different interviewers across the team that is hiring. Okay. So this is just a quick note on the timeline, but all you need to be mindful, all you need to be aware of is just that late July, beginning of August, we will have our applications open. Okay, so getting into the resume. So this is why we're here today. So so that was just some background on our Microsoft University recruitment timeline, our process, and our opportunities and roles. So this will be really focused on resume and CVs. Okay, and as I say, this is true for us in terms of how to make your application stand at Microsoft, but also for other employers. So and I believe, Julia, correct me if I'm wrong, I can share the slides with you. We'll be able to share it with the students. Is that right? Afterwards?
Yes, that's correct. Excellent.
So first and foremost, so as you can imagine, I see a lot of CVs. There's university recruiters as well, more so than other recruiters, just because of the volume of applications, volumes of roles we have. We also have a lot more applications. So first and foremost, one of the most common, so as a university student, so your CV really shouldn't be more than 1 page, okay? So 2 pages at the very maximum, particularly if you're getting to the graduate level, but 1 page. So if you can imagine someone within the industry, someone with I don't know, 10 years experience as a software engineer, their CV will not be more than 2 pages, okay? So for you as a university students, particularly as you're early on in your career, it's important that you make your CV concise and succinct. Okay, we don't want you just to put information on there for the sake of adding information there and to puff it out and thinking that the longer the CV, the better. No, we want the information to be relevant. And you'll see that's the key word for this discussion today. We want relevant information in your CV. We want it succinct, so concise. So if you keep it relevant and you keep it concise, then there's no reason why it shouldn't be more than one page. Okay. And then presentation, super important. Okay. Make sure it's clean, it's nicely formatted. There's so many different apps and tools, obviously Microsoft Word, there's even there's loads of templates and formats and stuff online. So there really is no excuse for having those kind of messy CVs, okay? And it doesn't need to be particularly complicated, okay? So don't think you try and redesign or create this great wacky CV. Sometimes the most simple ones is the most effective, as long as it's concise, it's clean, and it's formatted. And there's really no excuse for typos, okay? There's so many different apps out there. If you use a Microsoft Word, there's a spell checker, okay? So make sure you are checking and reviewing that CV. It doesn't reflect well on you if as a recruiter we've seen it and you, okay, you're applying for a software engineer, but you spelled software engineering incorrectly, okay? And I'm not just making up these examples. These are some of the most common examples or issues I see in CVs. Okay. As I say, simple, straightforward, and engaging. Include your contact information and clearly state your graduation date. Okay. So particularly if you're applying for university roles, so for us as university recruiters, we want to know. That's one of the. If you remember at the start, I was talking about who's eligible for an internship, who's eligible for a graduate job. Okay, if we have your graduation date clearly stated on there, then we're able to tell quite easily. And if you've applied for the wrong one, we can put you forward for the one where you would be eligible. If you applied for an internship when you should have applied for one of our full-time graduate roles, then we can put you forward for that. Okay. Okay, so what do university recruiters care about? Okay. So first and foremost, as I said, for university roles, most of you, if I'm not mistaken, are all university students or still at university or just completed or just starting. You're at various stages of university career anyway. So make sure clear and visible is your university, okay? Your university degree, so what you're studying. And then, as I said in the previous slide, your graduation date and month. Okay, so that should be there and that should be very clear and visible. Easy to see for the recruiter, because that's the first thing they check, that you're eligible. Okay, so you're going to a university, an accredited university, you're graduating in September 2023, for example. And then we want to hear about your internships and work experience. So we're fully aware and we're fully conscious that as university students, you don't necessarily have a lot or loads of kind of professional work experience. Okay. That's why we want to hear about internships you've done. That's why we want to hear about some of the part-time jobs you have done. Okay, if you work in the store part-time, that's great. Make sure you include that on there. If you volunteer, about say the top of your CV, make sure you have your university, your degree program you're studying, and your graduation date. Okay, make sure that's really clear. Include your internship and work experience. That's whether that's paid work experience or non-paid work experience as a volunteer. Those are really important because, as I say, it shows a recruiter you're developing and building upon soft skills. And soft skills will be just as relevant when you're applying for kind of industry-based roles. And then coding languages and relevant courseworks, okay? So what programming languages are you familiar with? What ones have you worked on actively? What projects have you done and completed? And then state whether you did those projects as part of a coursework or whether you did them just as part of your own kind of development journey in terms of progressing or improving your skills and your proficiency in a particular programming language. Okay. Academic record is less important, particularly for us here at Microsoft. But they may be relevant for some other employers. Okay, and then this is really, really important. Can I just ask you please to make sure you go on mute because I can hear some background noise. So this is really important. Okay, so the extracurricular projects. Okay, so what we mean by extracurricular. Okay, so what I mean by extracurricular and what we mean by extracurricular is just these are projects programs that you do outside, or activities rather, projects or activities you do outside of what is required of you on your course. So if as part of your course you have to do a certain piece of coursework, that's great. But what are you doing outside of that? Okay, outside of what you're required to do to pass your data structures and algorithms module, for example. Okay, so this is really important. So they can be, I don't know, if you built an app either by yourself or with some friends, if you developed an app on I don't know, Unity, for example, or Unreal Engine. Are you active on GitHub? Okay, you taking on open source projects and just developing and improving your skills. So for us, one really important thing at Microsoft, probably one of the most important, we want people with what we call a growth mindset. So people that are willing to learn, so you're constantly willing to learn. So what are you doing to keep learning and keep improving on your skills? So you're not just doing what's asked of you on your course, in terms of the 9 to 5, as I call it, of your course, but you're doing other things in addition. So that's really what extracurricular projects is about. So those personal projects you might do with friends or even by yourself, developing apps, updating your GitHub. So it's one thing having a GitHub, is another thing keeping it active, okay? Because we as recruiters, we do go and look into your GitHub. We look into it, and then the last thing you've updated was from last year. Well, it really shows you you're not necessarily developing or working on your skills. So update it, at least on a monthly basis. Go in, what have you done this month? Make sure you update that. If you've taken any online courses, there's a site Udemy where you can do various courses. You can do your Microsoft Azure 101 and those Microsoft Student Ambassadors. There's different options that we make available. So what else are you doing outside of your university degree to develop and improve yourself? So that's really important. That's what I often get asked, how can I make my application stand out? Well, I always say, if you're doing extracurricular projects, that will go a long way to making your application stand out, because it shows a recruiter you're not just doing what you're required as part of your computer science technology course, but on top of that, you're doing extra things to keep learning and developing your skills. And it also shows a certain amount of passion for that. Okay. And this is the point I keep saying, keep all information relevant. Okay. So make sure what you're writing in there is relevant to the application, relevant to the position you're applying for. Okay. If you've done stuff in primary school that may not necessarily be relevant, don't include it. So if you keep the information relevant, if we go back to the first page, I was talking about making sure the CV is no longer than a page. Okay. Sometimes when it's 2 pages or 3 pages, I often see that not all the information on there is relevant to a recruiter or relevant to that position that you're applying for. Okay. And it's okay to have more than one CV. You can have one CV where you have everything on there, that's perhaps 2 pages. And then as you're applying for different roles, you might be applying for a front-end engineering role. On that, you just highlight any coding language you've used or any projects you've worked on that's been mainly focused on front end. You might have one for back end, you might have one for data science. So it's okay to have one kind of central CV, but then you iterate that, you adopt it, you change it, and you might have different CVs for different type of roles that you're interested in. So it's absolutely okay to have that. So this is a sample resume, okay? So this is really simple. There's no fancy formatting or anything like that, but this is an example of a very good kind of simple, clean, and an engaging CV. So you can see, as I said, education. For university students, that should probably almost always be at the top of your CV, okay? Because that's taking up most of your time. You're full-time students, so that should almost always be at the top of your CV. As I said, as well. So graduating, when will you be graduating? Okay, in May 2018. So if you're a first year student, you'll be graduating in, I don't know, 2024 or 2025. Okay, so that's really important. Your degree, your field of study, whatever that may be. And then you might want to highlight relevant coursework. So if I'm applying, for example, for a university recruitment role, for a university internship at Microsoft, and on the job advert, so use the job advert. When you're applying, have your CV up, have the job advert up on another page, okay? And then make sure, most job adverts, they will have required qualifications. Different companies call it different things, but they'll think things, something that a successful candidate must have, or required qualifications. So demonstrate on your CV how you meet those required qualifications. So I know for us at Microsoft, as I spoke to on the previous slide, we talk about computer science fundamentals. So on there, just underline the courses you've done, an understanding of data structures and algorithm. And as I said, an ability to code in one of the main object-oriented programming languages. Okay. So the recruiter doesn't know you. Sometimes you forget that the recruiter doesn't know you, so they can't assume certain knowledge. They don't know your course more often than not, so they don't know what you do in your first year or second year. So don't just put, oh, I'm at, let's say, I'm at Strathmore University in Kenya, and everyone knows that in our first module, in our first year, we do data structures for example. The recruiter may not know that. And even if they do, they can't go off that. You may not have taken that module necessarily. Okay, so don't assume the recruiter knows certain information. Use the job advert for you're applying, have your CV up, and then where it says required qualification or the applicant must have, if you have those points, make sure that's demonstrated on your CV. Okay. And I'm really stressing that point because that's where a lot of applications fall down. You perhaps assume a recruiter has a certain level of knowledge about you or your course or your university, which they don't. And the recruiter, particularly in university recruitment, has so many applications that they don't have time to call and clarify. I can't go, oh, yeah, Julia, I see you've put this, but I know at Strathmore, for example, I keep using the University of Strathmore, it could be University of Lagos, Nigeria. But I know in your first year you do a course on algorithms. You haven't put it on your CV. Is that you don't have that luxury just due to the volume of applications. So don't assume knowledge. Make sure you put it on there. Okay, if it's relevant coursework. Professional experience. As I said, this might not be professional experience. You may not have had an opportunity to gain some. That's fine. You don't need to lie or exaggerate or embellish what you've done. If you haven't, talk about some volunteering or community work you've done. If you have had some internship experience, outline where that is. An internship at awesome company, that's an example, obviously. Put the date from September 2022 to October 2022, and then just a quick summary, 1 or 2 bullet points around what you did as part of their internship. Okay. And then if you've got personal projects, so remember, this is the extracurricular activities piece we're talking about. So if you've done stuff outside of your course or your modules to develop and improve your coding skill, or to really work on your Python programming. Okay, if you have, okay, well, Henry robot created a robot that could write resumes. That would be nice for 80% of the population. So you summarize what you did on that project, the impact it had. So what was the aim of that? And even if it's a small project for you amongst friends, what were you trying to achieve? Okay, and then what language did you use to make things work, or to do that project? If you use more than one, if you code in different languages, make sure you include that on there. And then, yeah, as I say, other extracurricular activities. So I know for many of you, you're part of the Student Ambassador Program. So absolutely write that in, okay? So the Microsoft Learn Student Ambassador Program. Absolutely include that in. Don't assume because you're part of it. Microsoft's a huge, huge corporation, right? 300,000 employees. So don't assume because you're part of it that a recruiter who will be looking at your application, if you're applying to us, will know that. So don't assume that. So make sure you state it on there. Okay. I know there's some of you part of the Google Developer Student Club. I know you may be applying for Microsoft, but that's also really relevant. That's extracurricular activities. That's stuff you're doing outside of your course to develop and improve a network. So make sure you include that as well. Even if it's a competitive thing, you might have done AWS program. I don't know why you did that, but say you did. Include that in there. That's relevant. Okay, so that's relevant to the industry in which we're in. Absolutely include that. And then your skills. Okay, so we're fully aware that you're a university student. So we're also fully aware that you may not necessarily be fully proficient. Sometimes I see on applications, CVs, Java, fully proficient or really strong. Well, I know some software engineers that have been working for 15, 20 years who would still not say they are fully proficient in a particular language. So it's very surprising to read that from students. Okay, and then if you're saying that in your CV, and then when you get to the interview, they're expecting you to demonstrate that full proficiency. So be honest. It's really important. Be honest about your level of skill. So be self-reflective and self-critical about where you are. Okay, we're aware that you're students, so you won't necessarily be fully proficient or fully skilled at using a particular programming tool, programming language. Okay, so remember that. Be honest about where you are on your journey, because it is a journey. It's constant. Even as I say, I know it. Software engineers that have been working for 15, 20 plus years who would still not say they're necessarily fully skilled at a particular language. This is another example. This one is a bit more visual for you. Okay. So it has a picture. The picture is great. This is by no means mandatory. You don't need to include a picture. But I also see some people including the date of birth. That's really not necessary. It really isn't necessary. So your age shouldn't be a factor. Certainly for us, in terms of whether or not you're considered. It's if you meet the eligibility requirement. So you're studying at a university, an accredited university, or you meet those kind of 3 points around computer science fundamentals, etc., then we would consider you. The age isn't going to do anything to change our consideration. And remember what I've been saying about keeping the information relevant. So age doesn't have any impact or influence on whether or not you're successful. So that means that information is not relevant. Okay, so you can take it out. You can see there, John Doe's got their email address. That's quite clear. The telephone number. Okay. Remember, Microsoft is international. It's a global company. A recruiter like me might be looking at your CV based in a different country. So I would, a little hint or a little tip I would give you to include the country code. Okay. Include a country code at the front end of your telephone number. If you have a GitHub page, include a link there. If you're going to include a link, make sure it works. Okay, make sure the deep link works. So if I as a recruiter go and click on it, and it's an error or it's an incorrect page or something like that, that doesn't reflect well on you. Okay, so make sure it works. If you are going to include a GitHub, make sure you have an active GitHub profile. So once a month, just go in, take 30 minutes once a month, go in, update your profile and what you've been working on. You can see here we've got the education, as I say, that should be at the top or near the top. Okay, and for students, I really strongly encourage you to make sure your education's at the top. Okay, your major, your what you're studying, where your university is. So your university and then the field of study. Sorry, I'm confused there. And if you notice, it's missing one thing. Would anyone like to guess what's missing? We've talked about it in the previous slides. Put it in the comments what's missing. Okay, there's something missing here in terms of we've talked about, and which is really important. Okay, put it in the chat and then I'll come back to it later. And then you've got John Doe's listed the skills. So the programming languages they're familiar with, that they've used and they're comfortable using. Doesn't mean they're fully proficient, but they've used it and they're comfortable using it. And you can see this one, is say it's simple, it's straightforward, it's engaging, and it's not 2 or 3 pages, okay, with a long list of information and points that may not necessarily be relevant. Okay. And this is a little tip that you'll start to learn, and which will serve you really well actually when you do start jobs, and you are having kind of performance discussions and performance appraisals with your managers, and to get into the habit early and get into the habit now of using sentences with action verbs. Okay, so I built and developed an app using X, Y, and Z. I led, I initiated, I managed to use start each sentence with an action verb, so it shows the impact of what you've done. We talk about impact a lot in Microsoft, so it shows what you've done. Okay, and once again, I will stress this because I see this far too often. Don't exaggerate. Don't feel the need to exaggerate what you've done or your role. If you did something as part of the team, tell us what you did within that team. Okay, don't feel the need to exaggerate. There's far too many examples where there's a team or a project of 4 and everyone seems to have been the group lead or to be the lead of a particular project. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean you'll do well or score better in an interview. So just be honest about you, your role, and your contribution. Okay. So with more time, your skills will become numerous. Okay, but at the outset, that's okay if it's just 3 or 4 languages, and you're learning another one. You can put you're learning another one. You've done 1 or 2 projects using or learning this new language. Okay. And as I say, you can have more than one resume. So you can have one central one which will have all the information about you, your degree, your course, and then you can tailor a smaller 1-page or a shorter, concise 1-page one based on the role you're applying for. Okay, or the company. Okay, so as I said at the start, for us at Microsoft, really big on growth mindset, and that's something we particularly look for in our university students. So it's not, we don't want people that know it all, we want people that are willing to learn it all. Okay, so on that CV, demonstrate examples of you going out and being proactive about your learning. Okay, so proactive learning isn't just, I'm on this course at university, I'm doing data science, and this is what I'm doing. Outside of that, I'm not doing anything, I'm not learning. Okay, so make sure you tailor your resume to the company and the role you're applying. Once again, make sure the information relevant. If it's relevant, it'll be short, it'll be concise, and it'll be engaging. Okay, so the 2 examples of CVs I've showed you haven't necessarily blown the world apart. You don't need to be a UX content designer to put it together. Okay, that brings us to the end of that. I'm happy to take questions. I haven't been looking at the chat, so I don't know if there are questions. I'm happy to take questions.
Yes, so I think we have a few questions. I can read some out for you.
Yes, please, Julia, that'd be great.
Okay, cool. So we have a question from Wambui Karanja, and she's asking, for the CVs, do the recruiters use ATS? And I think we have a follow-up question on the same. Billy is asking for any tips around getting around ATS.
I'm not quite sure what we mean by ATS. ATS is it's a recruitment platform. Well, it can be a recruitment platform, but there's so many different ATSs out there that different companies use. Could we expand on what that means, Julia, if you know?
Okay, so I think my understanding of ATS is just the tracking system for the applications. So probably if the two attendees that asked that question, probably they could just expound more on that if they meant something different. So maybe you can just give them a chance to expound more on that on the chat as we go to the next question.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, because I have a different understanding of ATS, so applicant tracking software, but each company has one. It does slightly different things. But I'm not sure what the questions aimed at really.
Okay, so maybe Wamboy and Billy kindly just provide clarity on that question, then we'll just get back to it. So the other question is from Sobit, and the question is, what if you have a degree in, let's say, music and did a coding boot camp? So I think what's the stand for such applicants?
They repeat the question for me, Julia. Sorry, I didn't quite get it. So I caught the end of it.
Yeah, so Sobit is asking, what if you have a degree in, let's say, music and you did a coding boot camp?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So as I say, we don't necessarily look at your degree background. Okay, so we don't look to see what degree you studied. What we look for, particularly the first stage when we're looking as a recruiter reviewing your CV, is if you've got those computer science fundamentals. Okay, you've got a good understanding of data structure and algorithm, and you can code in one of the main kind of object-oriented programming languages: Java, Python, C, C++, C Sharp. So that's what we really look for at the outset. Now, our intention is that during the recruitment process, we'll assess. So during the telephone interview, we'll assess your soft skills. During the codility, we'll send you a link to do a technical exercise. We'll get a good sense for where you're at technically, and then of course during the final round interview as well. So we don't really, as I say, we don't really look at your degree per se. So if you've got a music degree, that's okay. But if you can just demonstrate how you meet those kind of requirements for the job, then we would consider you. And during the process, we'll get a good feel for where you are technically, and go through there. So yeah, say degree doesn't matter, especially as coding is something you can do online, what you can do in your spare time. You can just build and develop apps and program and stuff. And just learn by doing. So you don't necessarily have to have the theoretical background to it. If you're willing to learn, remember what I keep saying this, if you're willing to learn, then that's a really, really good attribute for us.
Okay, thank you for that response. So maybe just to chime in a little bit on that, there was a story that was shared recently from one of the current software engineers at Microsoft ADC. And his story is very inspiring because he was a fisherman, then he just learned how to code online. And then right now he's a current software engineer at Microsoft. So I've just pasted a link to his story on the chat. So after this session, probably you can have a read. It's a very inspiring story. So from there, we also have another question. And the one that is asking is interested in knowing if they can get an internship in the data analysis field. And I think we've also received a similar question right now from someone asking if Microsoft offers opportunities that deal with hardware, e.g. IoT.
Yeah, so I'll take the data science one first. So and currently within our ADCs or Africa Hiring, we don't have specific programs for data science students, but we, of course, Microsoft's a huge corporation. We have teams that whose work may lean itself better to kind of data scientists. So what we would do is, so we'd encourage you to apply for opportunities with software engineering, for example. And then what happens during, if you were to be selected through the different stages of the process, that's obviously taken into account that you might come from more of a data science background. And then once it gets to the final round interviews, what the interviewers will do is they will then think, oh, if you were to be successful, they would make sure or ensure that you're assigned to a team, because as I say, we hire a lot of interns and full-timers, and there's different hiring team. They will make sure the team you're assigned to has an element of kind of data science, because it's more closely linked to your interests and passions. But we don't have, as it stands anyway, within university recruitment, that's not to say we don't have those roles in just normal industry hire, but within university recruitment, we don't have those specific data scientist roles. So I would encourage you to apply through our SWE roles. and obviously that's taken into account during the process. And where possible, the team will always try and put you in a role that has the element of data science. The second question, I can't quite remember. Sorry, Julia.
Yeah, so I think Daniel was just asking if there are any opportunities for anyone pursuing hardware, like IoT.
Oh yes, hardware. As it stands, so yeah. The short answer to this is no, as it stands, especially during our ADC. There's no, like the data science, there's no specific. There aren't any specific roles or opportunities within university higher recruitment for kind of hardware. So we don't have advertised for hardware engineering students, unfortunately. So I don't need specific roles. But if you are interested, see, apply through the software engineering route, go through the process. And if you do get through the end of the process and that's your strong focus, then we would. What tends to happen is the hiring manager goes around and asks the questions of the different hiring teams to see if there's a team that you'd be better suited for. Hardware is a lot more difficult than data science, I must admit. But yeah, currently no like open recruitment role, university recruitment roles for just pure hardware students within our ADCs in Africa.
Okay, thank you for that response. So I see we have a very interesting question from Teddy. And the question is, a different recruiter once advised that you shouldn't have ratings to the skills because it might play against the applicant. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a good, yeah, so this is probably down to recruiter, to recruiter preference. So different recruiters like different things. I don't mind. What I think really reflects well on you, really stands out for me as a recruiter reviewing a CV. So if you're talking about you've used a particular programming language, if you have a link, if you've done it and updated on GitHub in terms of what you've done, if you have a link to that specific project or app or whatever or tool you've built, that stands really well. That reflects really well on you because it's demonstrable experience. So you're not just saying you've done this, you're actually showing us you've done this by including the link. So whether you put fully proficient or not proficient, that's how a recruiter interprets that will vary recruiter to recruiter. But at least having the different languages you're comfortable with is definitely important. But what would really stand out is if you include links to the projects and work you've done. Then that goes from just talking about doing a project using Python to showing us through a link that takes us to a tool, wherever that may take us to, your GitHub, the actual project or tool or app or whatever you've done, built and completed. Yeah, that was that.
Yeah, sorry, I see our time is up. I don't know if you have time for one more question.
I'll take one more, but I do have a meeting next, so I'll take one last one.
Okay. All right. So we have a question of, if you have a GitHub account but you have been inactive, is it better for you not to include it on your CV?
It's better for you to go and update your GitHub account. Not including the CV is the lazy way, and the shortcut. It's better for you to go and include and update your GitHub account, work on projects, develop your skills. That's what I would recommend is better for you to do.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for the presentation. And yes, we'll definitely share the deck with everyone that joined. So maybe just before we leave, I would really appreciate to get your feedback. So I've shared our form on the chat. So kindly, please just take a minute to fill that form. It will really help us in getting the feedback of what kind of sessions you would like us to have next. Then our next session will be on Wednesday. We have a session on digital transformation. So kindly also RSVP for that session. It will be very informative. Would really love to see you all. So for today's session, we actually started with the session on CV because this actually serves as a precursor. So everyone who is pursuing web dev, next week we'll have a technical workshop where we'll be building websites to showcase our resumes. So make sure you implement the feedback and the tips that we've been given today and share your CVs with your mentors just to get some opinions on the same. Otherwise, I see we are 2 minutes over time. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much to our speaker, and do enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.
Thank you all very much. Thanks.